The 30th of December, Part 6 of Mr. Pickwick's Christmas. From the centre of the ceiling of this kitchen, old Wardle had just suspended with his own hands a huge branch of mistletoe, and this same branch of mistletoe instantaneously gave rise to a scene of general and most delightful struggling and confusion, in the midst of which Mr. Pickwick, with a gallantry that would have done honour to a descendant of Lady Tollinglower herself, took the old lady by the hand, led her beneath the mystic branch, and saluted her in all courtesy and decorum. The old lady submitted to this piece of practical politeness with all the dignity which befitted so important and serious a solemnity. But the younger ladies, not being so thoroughly imbued with a superstitious veneration for the custom, or imagining that the value of a salute is very much enhanced if it cost a little trouble to obtain it, screamed and struggled, and ran into corners, and threatened and remonstrated, and did everything but leave the room, until some of the less adventurous gentlemen were on the point of desisting, when they all at once found it useless to resist any longer, and submitted to be kissed with a good grace. Mr. Winkle kissed the young lady with the black eyes, and Mr. Snodgrass kissed Emily, and Mr. Weller, not being particular about the form of being under the mistletoe, kissed Emma and the other female servants, just as he called them. After the poor relations, they kissed everybody, not even excepting the plainer portions of the young lady visitors, who in their excessive confusion ran right under the mistletoe as soon as it was hung up without knowing it. Wardle stood with his back to the fire, surveying the whole scene with the utmost satisfaction, and the fat boy took the opportunity of appropriating to his own use and summarily devouring a particularly fine mince pie that had been carefully put by for somebody else. Now, the screaming had subsided, and faces were in a glow, and curls in a tangle, and Mr. Pickwick, after kissing the old lady, as before mentioned, was standing under the mistletoe, looking with a very pleased countenance on all that was passing around him, when the young lady with the black eyes, after a little whispering with the other young ladies, made a sudden dart forward, and putting her arm around Mr. Pickwick's neck, saluted him affectionately on the left cheek. And before Mr. Pickwick distinctly knew what was the matter, he was surrounded by the whole body and kissed by every one of them. It was a pleasant thing to see Mr. Pickwick in the centre of the group, now pulled this way, now that, and first kissed on the chin, then on the nose, and then on the spectacles, and to hear the peals of laughter which were raised on every side. But it was still a more pleasant thing to see Mr. Pickwick blinded shortly afterwards with a silk handkerchief, falling up against the wall and scrambling into corners, and going through all the mysteries of blind man's buff, with the utmost relish for the game, until, at last, he caught one of the poor relations, and then had to evade the blind man himself, which he did with a nimbleness and agility that elicited the admiration and applause of all beholders. The poor relations caught the people who they thought would like it, and when the game flagged, they got caught themselves. When they all tied a blind man's buff, there was a great game at Snapdragon, and when fingers enough were burned with that, and all the raisins were gone, they sat down by the huge fire of blazing logs to a substantial supper, and a mighty bowl of wassail, something smaller than an ordinary wash-house copper, in which the hot apples were hissing and bubbling with a rich look, and a jolly sound that were perfectly irresistible. "Ah, this," said Mr. Pickwick, looking round him, "this is indeed comfort." "Our invariable custom," replied Mr. Wardle. "Everybody sits down with us on Christmas Eve, as you see them now, servants and all, and here we wait until the clock strikes 12 to usher Christmas in and beguile the time with forfeits and old stories. Trundle, rake up the fire." Up flew the bright sparks in myriads as the logs were stirred. The deep red blaze sent forth a rich glow that penetrated into the furthest corner of the room, and cast its cheerful tint on every face. "Come," said Wardle, "a song, a Christmas song. I'll give you one, in default of a better." "Bravo," said Mr. Pickwick. "Fill up," cried Wardle. "It will be 2 hours good before you see the bottom of the bowl through the deep rich colour of the wassail. Fill up all around. And now for the song." Thus saying, the merry old gentleman, in a good round sturdy voice, commenced without much ado. A Christmas Carol. I care not for spring, on his fickle wing, let the blossoms and buds be born. He woos them amain with his treacherous rein, and he scatters them ere the morn. An inconstant elf, he knows not himself, nor his own changing mind an hour. He'll smile in your face, and with wide grimace he'll wither your youngest flower. Let the summer sun to his bright home run, he shall never be sought by me. When he's dimmed by a cloud, I can laugh aloud, and care not how sulky he be. For his darling child is the madness wild that sports in fierce fever's train, and when love is too strong it don't last long, as many have found to their pain. A mild harvest night, by the tranquil light of the modest and gentle moon, has a far sweeter sheen for me, I ween, than the broad and unblushing noon. But every leaf awakens my grief, as it lieth beneath the tree, so let autumn's air be never so fair, it by no means agrees with me. But my song I troll out for Christmas stout, the hearty, the true, and the bold. A bumper I drain, and with might and main give 3 cheers for this Christmas old. We'll usher him in with a merry din that shall gladden his joyous heart, and will keep him up while there's bite or sup, and in fellowship good we'll part. In his fine honest pride he scorns to hide one jot of his hard weather scars. They're no disgrace, for there's much the same trace on the cheeks of our bravest tars. Then again I sing till the roof doth ring, and it echoes from wall to wall, to the stout old wight, fair welcome tonight, as the king of the seasons all. This song was tumultuously applauded, for friends and dependents make a capital audience, and the poor relations especially were in perfect ecstasies of rapture. Again was the fire replenished, and again went the wassail round. How it snows, said one of the men in a low tone. Snows, does it? Said Wardle. Rough cold night, sir, replied the man, and there's a wind got up that drifts it across the fields in a thick white cloud. What does Jem say? Inquired the old lady. There ain't anything the matter, is there? No, no, mother, replied Wardle. He says there's a snowdrift and a wind that's piercing cold. I should know that by the way it rumbles in the chimney. Ah, said the old lady, there was just such a wind and just such a fall of snow a good many years back, I recollect. Just 5 years before your poor father died. It was a Christmas Eve, too, and I remember that on that very night he told us the story about the goblins that carried away old Gabriel Grubb. The story about what? Said Mr. Pickwick. Oh, nothing, nothing, replied Wardle. About an old sexton that the good people down here supposed to have been carried away by goblins. Suppose, ejaculated the old lady. Is there anybody hardy enough to disbelieve it? Suppose? Haven't you ever heard since you were a child that he was carried away by the goblins? And don't you know he was? Very well, mother, he was, if you like, said Wardle, laughing. He was carried away by goblins, Pickwick, and there's an end of the matter. No, no, said Mr. Pickwick, not an end of it, I assure you, for I must hear how and why and all about it. Wardle smiled, as every head was bent forward to hear, and filling out the wassail with no stinted hand, nodded a health to Mr. Pickwick, and began as follows. But bless our editorial heart, what a long chapter we have been betrayed into. We had quite forgotten all such petty restrictions as chapters, we solemnly declare. So here goes, to give the goblin a fair start in a new one. A clear stage and no favour for the goblins, ladies and gentlemen, if you please. And we'll get the next chapter and the goblin story tomorrow.